relationships. And when somebody asked him, what is the greatest commandment? Jesus, of all the commandments in the Bible, what is the greatest commandment that we can see in the Bible? And this was his answer. And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Can you please turn to the person beside you and say, I love you, bro. I love you, sis. Wonderful. Isn't it just amazing to just see the body of Christ, brothers and sisters, loving with the love of Christ? That is the picture that we want to see. And you know what? As we look at this passage, there's one thing that I want you to observe. If you look at the commandments, the greatest commandments, love is the foundation of relationships. It's all about love. It's loving God and loving others. And another observation is this. The sequence that we are to love others is to first love God before we can love others. And if we follow this model that God has created for all of us to enjoy, this is where we can really experience true love, real joy, acceptance, unity, and most of all, intimacy. Now, we want that in your relationships.
Yes.
But the reality is, not all relationships are like that. Would you agree? In fact, some of our relationships are broken, and some have been severed. And you know why? I realize that if we do not follow the model of Christ, the model of God in our relationships, there's no way that we can really experience the intimacy that He wants all of us to enjoy. And you know what? It's just surprising that in the relationships that we have, it's in the same relationships that we experience disappointments, hurts, and even betrayal. And so, the fact is, if we look at our marriages and our family relationships, this is where we get hurt the most. This is where we get betrayed the most. And you know why? This is something I realized. The closer the relationship, the harder and more hurtful it will be to restore that relationship. It's too broken. Why? Because we are imperfect people. Can you please look at the person beside you? You are imperfect. And sabihin mo, so am I. Okay, very good. And you know what? Another reason is we have invested so much in these relationships. We have invested our time. We have sacrificed for this relationship just to protect and grow it and build it. And we put our trust to the very people that will later on disappoint us and hurt us. But the question is, how do we respond when we get hurt in our relationships? How do we respond when our relationships are already broken? How do we navigate through that? Some of us resort to anger. We get mad. We get angry. Right? And that's the normal response that we have, especially when we are betrayed. Some of us give the cold shoulder or the silent treatment. Some of us isolate ourselves. And to a certain extent, we cancel the people that are dear to us. Right? Mag-delete ng chat, mag-close na account, that's it. Friendship, relationship, over. But most of all, some of us are not even satisfied with that gesture. You know what we do? We retaliate. And it's just so painful to see relationships going that way. In fact, I've learned that married couples today, the minute that they experience conflict, you know what's in their mind? I'm gonna divorce my wife. I'm gonna separate with my wife. I'm gonna file an annulment for my wife. These are the things that are going on in the lives of married couples today. In fact, not only married couples, even parents. abandon their family so that they can join another family. Why? Because they have been broken. Can you see? And lastly, can you imagine children today are starting to save up, starting to prepare their future. And for what purpose? Because there's so much brokenness in the family, they want to leave their family. That's how broken relationships can really affect us. Now, the question is, can we still heal from broken relationships? Can we still heal from broken relationships? Yes. And I'm glad that you said yes. But we only do it with God's help. And so, you might ask, why God? Isn't it that God authored relationships? If He authored relationships, then He is in the business of restoring and healing relationships, right? Right?
Yes.
Can I get an amen for that? Okay. And most of all, He is in the business of really investing and restoring relationships. But Vince, you might say, you don't understand. My relationship is too broken. My relationship is too hurt. My relationship is just impossible to restore. Now, listen to me. Listen well. Are you telling me that the God who created the whole universe out of nothing, and the God who can bring the dead back to life, cannot restore your broken relationship? Is that what you're telling me? Well, the truth is, there is no relationship that is too hard for God to restore. Amen? Now, the title of our message tonight is Heal in Love. Can you say heal in love? And we'll be taking it from the passage, 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 7 to 9. And just to give you a background of this passage, Peter, Apostle Peter, was writing to the believers in exile. Why? Because they're being persecuted by the people who are killing Christians. They're running after Christians. And so he wanted to strengthen them. He wanted to encourage them. In fact, he wanted them to persevere. He wanted them to give praise to God in spite of all the trials that they were experiencing. Why? Because Jesus Christ, by His grace, have saved them from damnation. That is the very purpose why they can worship, why they can sing praises to Him. And not only that, Peter was encouraging them to live holy and pleasing lives to God. For what purpose? So that even if people are persecuting us because they see how we live our lives according to the ways of Jesus, they would want to have the Jesus that we have. That was the very purpose why Peter was encouraging the believers, even if they were persecuted. And not only that, Peter was encouraging them to keep their conduct honorable. And so as we dive in now to verse 7, I want us now to read a few words at a time. You husbands, how many of you here are husbands? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of you here are husbands with one wife? Oh, just kidding, just kidding. Okay. Okay, husbands, I want you to listen. Okay? It says here, in the same way, I highlighted the phrase, in the same way. What does in the same way mean? Can you tell me? What does in the same way mean? It means you have to do the same thing. And to understand what that in the same way means, we have to go back to the previous verses. Because Peter was addressing a different kind of audience in verses 1 to 6. And would you like to know who that audience is? It's the wives. And what was his encouragement to the wives? He was encouraging the wives to submit to their husbands. In fact, husbands, this should be our favorite verse, right? We want to use this verse. Whenever we encounter conflicts, we want to use this verse. It's like a card that we throw into our wives and say, you submit because God said you submit. That is so unloving. That is not how God designed marriage relationships to be. And so, with that, you husbands in the same way live with your wives. And I realize that you may be living with your wife in one household. But it does not follow that because you're living in the same roof or under the same roof, you're connected. In fact, many of you are living in the same place, but you are disconnected. And so, Peter was encouraging them, specifically the husbands, in the same way, as the wives submit to their husbands out of their obedience and reverence to God, you, husbands, must likewise do the same thing. In fact, he does not stop there. There were two things that Peter wanted the husbands to do. What are the two things? Can you see this? Live with your wives in an understanding way, as with someone weaker, since she is a woman, and show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. Imagine that. Not just living under the same roof, but submitting to one another. What a beautiful picture of marriage would that be, right? Can you imagine that? The wife is submitting to the husband. At the same time, the husband is also submitting out of reverence to God, out of obedience to God. What a beautiful picture of marriage. But you know what? In spite of that, husbands and wives have specific responsibilities and roles to play to create harmony, unity, and intimacy within the marriage. And how do we do that? Well, husbands, do you know your roles and responsibilities? Well, let me tell you. As a husband, you are the provider. You are the protector. You are the servant leader. Not just the leader. You serve. And out of that service, your family members will follow. Not what else? Unconditional lover. And no wonder that Peter teaches us how to live with our wives in an understanding way and showing her honor. What does it mean to live in an understanding way with our wife? It means listening to them. It means being sensitive to their needs, to their fears, to their feelings. What else? To treat them with respect. That's the first thing. And the second thing is equally valuable. What's the second thing? Show her honor. Honor in the Greek, timi, okay, means to value, to respect, to highly esteem, to treat as precious and weighty. And the reason why Peter was encouraging them to do this, what are the reasons? Because they are a fellow heir of the grace of life. They are also recipients of God's grace. Jesus died for them as well. He shed his blood just so they will experience forgiveness, life, and eternal life with him someday. And the second is to show her honor. How do you show honor to your wife? And you know what? I realize this is a great opportunity for me to really honor somebody very special in my life. And so I would like to call my wife over there. Bea, can you please applaud her? Bea. Please say a family. I will just take a moment just to honor my wife. Bea, my love, I am forever